Modern technology has revamped the way of life for almost everyone. The way teenagers communicate nowadays is completely different than the way teenagers communicated just 10 years ago. A decade ago, no teenager was consumed in updating their Facebook status or texting their friends every 2 minutes, but in today's world it's clear that technology has transformed us. Recent studies have shown that 75% of all teenagers now own a mobile phone, and with 90% of phone-owning teens sending and receiving texts, most of them daily, texting has established itself as the favoured communication hub for the majority of teens. As if spending their waking hours welded to their phone wasn't enough, 73% of teenagers use social networking sites. As someone who knows the effects of technology all too well, I'm going to investigate whether social networking sites help us connect or isolate us from the world around us. I'm Flora Dixon. I'm 20 years old, and 2 years ago I made a prominent decision to stay on the Isle of Wight where I grew up while all my friends went off to university. I decided to delete my Facebook page. From August to December I was Facebook free, and I actually felt better for it. By the end of December, my friends decided to recreate Facebook page for me as it made contact easier for them. At first, I only went on it maybe a couple of times a week to send the odd message to friends, but that's about it. A year later, and it's a much different story, I now go on Facebook daily and read Twitter in the morning like it's a daily paper.
From someone who was so persistent not to get attached to technology, I now find it almost a necessity to be connected. This was my first phone, which I got when I was 13 years old, and I remember being perfectly happy with it. It texted, it called, it did everything you kind of want from a phone. Now, in 2014, I now have an iPhone, which, as sad as it sounds, I honestly couldn't imagine my life without it.
I know I'm not alone in being obsessed with staying connected, as whenever I go online, plenty of other people are online too, and I always have something new on my Twitter feed, despite only following a small amount of people. Is this just how our generation communicates now, how we validate our opinions and our attitudes and behaviours? Or do we actually have a case of FOMO, which stands for fear of missing out? Leading researcher of the topic, Andy Przybylski, said, "It is no longer something we have to sit at a computer and log into, as we have access all the time on our phones. It is easier to get into a rhythm of people's lives, and like never before, as we get alerts and texts. We have to learn new skills to control our usage and enjoy social media in moderation. Until we do, it creates a double-edged sword aspect to social media." I decided to create my own survey in order to find out more about teenagers and their connection to social networking sites.
These results are really interesting, as everybody who answered the questions had at least one social networking site. In fact, 100% of them had Facebook. When I asked how often they went on these social networking sites, each of my contributors said at least once a day. To me, if you're using something every day, you're becoming quite reliant on it, and I think it would be really interesting to see what would happen to these people if you suddenly couldn't log on to your social networking sites and how they would react. When I asked if we should be worried about becoming addicted to Facebook, everybody had plenty to say, but they focused more on how others were approaching the social networking site and not about themselves. Are we in denial about how much we use social networking sites? I can't really say I'm surprised by my survey results, as from someone who used to love their own company and relish at the moments they had by themselves, I've become quite attached to technology in order to connect.
It can lead to isolation. I think often younger people, perhaps less physical, less people are out and about playing sports, doing that kind of thing. It's very easy to sit in your room. And I think one of the real dangers that isn't always obvious is quite a lot of people who are isolated will create a kind of Facebook persona, and it's not the real person. There can be a danger that you don't get real intimacy in your friendships and relationships, that no one's going to perhaps everyone wants to be liked, everybody's at all the best parties, and you do come across students who've really created a very false picture of themselves, and that can be isolating, I think.
I'm off to meet Stephen Logg, who is a hardcore social networking site user. I want to see how attached a person could become and the implications it's had on his life from being addicted. So you've got 7,968 followers. How did you manage to get that so many?
Because of YouTube. Whatever's on my mind, I make a video about it. And then I give links to my Twitter and my social network accounts on the description below. So I'm assuming that's also how people find me.
Do you feel like you have more control over how you come across, and that's why you feel much more connected to people through social networking sites?
Well, I don't really care how I come across the internet because it's just the internet. I do like to leave a good impression, but sometimes people get the wrong impression of me and think I'm a total so-and-so. I don't know, I kind of like that kind of edge.
Do you mind me asking, do you get any negative comments?
Yes, I do. Well, I do, yeah. Back in the day, I used to get a lot of hate on there. I don't know, it was kind of a good thing for me because I managed to get thicker skin. So now when people say stuff like that, I'm just like, cool, like bye, I don't care. I don't know, it just kind of thickens my skin each time I get negative, so you know, it helps.
After meeting Stephen, I found it really interesting, as I always thought getting negative comments from social networking sites would be seen as a really bad thing, but he actually found it a positive and he's used it in his life. So I suppose what I once thought was a negative about social networking sites has now turned into a positive.
I thought I would Skype my friend Jordan, who went travelling around Thailand around 3 months ago. I want to find out how social networking sites have helped her keep in contact with her friends and family while she's been away. Do you think social networking sites are making it easier for people to communicate with each other?
Definitely. I think it's the best way of keeping in contact with everyone, and like being able to share photos and videos and like status updates to let people know what you're up to, and it's really important. Facebook has allowed me to be connected so that I can keep in contact with my parents so they know that I'm safe, keep in contact with my friends, let them know what I'm up to, and make sure that I can meet up with my friends when they're coming up to see me. So it's been really useful for me. I mean, social networking sites help me feel like more secure. I don't feel like I'm totally like abandoned on my own.
It's really interesting talking to Jordan, as I think she's a prime example of how social networking sites can be used for the better. They've kind of allowed her to travel around the world and still be in contact with her friends and family. I must admit that I keep in contact with her through Facebook, and if I didn't have access to that, I think we wouldn't have been as close, as we would have spent months without talking. So I've got to be thankful for Facebook for that. As Facebook only launched in 2004, I decided to get a personal view on what life was like before social networking sites. And what better person to hear it from than my own mother. So what was it like when you were younger and you didn't have social networking sites?
It was very different to how it is now. It wasn't that long ago, but for example, we didn't have mobile phones. As a teenager at 16 years old, if you wanted to have a private conversation, you'd go to the local red phone box in the village. If you didn't want your mum and dad eavesdropping on a conversation in the hallway on the family phone, that's just what you did. That's how it was. I think there are positives in that we do have this broader network to keep contact with friends, family, etc. But we are becoming dependent on that, and I think there's a risk of it overtaking day-to-day life.
What I've learned on this journey is that, as a generation, we're becoming more dependent on social media as part of our social development. I can't see us stopping using social networking sites in order to define our own identity, but maybe as a society, we could once in a while disregard those much needed electronics.